Today, we're going to be diving into a pretty heavy topic, the case of Richard Kirk and the controversial events surrounding his marijuana-induced murder. Now, I know you might be thinking, what does marijuana have to do with murder? Well, as it turns out, a lot. The case of Richard Kirk has sparked a nationwide conversation about responsible drug use, mental health, gun control, and the far-reaching consequences of violent crimes. So, whether you're a frequent marijuana user or simply curious about the case, join me as we dive into the details and uncover some important lessons that we can all learn from the tragedy of Richard Kirk's murder. Richard Kirk was a 47-year-old man who gained notoriety for committing a shocking act of violence that would later become known as the marijuana murder. Prior to the incident, Kirk was known to be a loving husband and father who had no prior criminal history. He had been married to his wife, Kristine, for 15 years, and they had 3 younger children together. Kirk had worked as a financial planner and was described by friends and colleagues as a hardworking and responsible individual. However, in the months leading up to the murder, his behavior began to change. He reportedly suffered from anxiety and depression and had been prescribed medication to manage his symptoms. Additionally, he had started to use marijuana more frequently, which some believe may have contributed to his erratic behavior. On the night of April 14, 2014, Kirk shot and killed his wife while she was on the phone with 911. He then proceeded to destroy the family's home before the police arrived and arrested him. The murder shocked the community and garnered national attention. Kirk was charged with first-degree murder and faced the possibility of life in prison without parole. The case would later raise questions about marijuana use and its potential effects on mental behavior and health. The events leading up to the murder began earlier that day when Kirk purchased a package of marijuana-infused candy from a local dispensary. Kirk had reportedly been suffering from anxiety and depression, and he believed that the candy would help to alleviate his symptoms. Later that evening, Kristine became concerned about Richard's behavior and called 911. She reported that he was hallucinating and had asked her to shoot him. While Kristine was on the phone with the 911 operator, Richard retrieved a handgun from their safe and shot her in the head. The call continued for several more minutes, during which the operator heard gunshots and Kristine's moans. When the police arrived at the scene, they found Richard in a state of confusion and disorientation. He told the officers that he had killed his wife and had ingested the marijuana candy. The police later found the partially consumed package of candy in the home. Following the murder of his wife, Kristine, Richard Kirk was taken into custody by the Denver Police Department. Detectives immediately began a thorough investigation into the events leading up to the murder and Kirk's behavior at the time of the crime. During the investigation, police discovered that Kirk had purchased a package of marijuana-infused candy earlier in the day. Police obtained a warrant to search Kirk's home and found evidence of drug use, including several marijuana plants. He was held in custody without bail pending his trial. Throughout the investigation and trial, Kirk maintained that he had no memory of the events leading up to the murder due to the effects of the marijuana. The police investigation was comprehensive and thorough, and ultimately played a critical role in securing Kirk's conviction. The evidence collected by the police helped to build a strong case against Kirk, and the prosecution was able to use this evidence to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. During his trial, Richard Kirk's defense attorney argued that his actions on the night of the murder were a result of his use of marijuana, which they claimed caused him to experience severe psychosis and lose touch with reality. They also argued that he was not in his right mind at the time of the crime, and therefore could not be held fully responsible for his actions. To support their argument, the defense presented expert witnesses who testified about the potential effects of marijuana on mental health and behavior. They also presented evidence of Kirk's previous struggles with anxiety and depression, as well as his prescription medication use. Kirk himself entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. He claimed that he had no memory of the events leading up to the murder and that he had been in a dissociative state at the time. Despite the defense's argument, the prosecution maintained that Kirk was fully aware of his actions and had deliberately chosen to kill his wife. They presented evidence that Kirk had a history of violence towards his wife and had previously threatened her with a gun. The prosecution's case against Richard Kirk was built on strong evidence, including eyewitness accounts, physical evidence, and forensic analysis. One of the key pieces of evidence presented by the prosecution was the 911 call made by Kirk's wife, Kristine, on the night of the murder. The call captured the sound of the gunshot that killed her, as well as Kirk's subsequent destruction of the family's home. The prosecution argued that his behavior leading up to the murder, including his purchase and consumption of marijuana-infused candy, was a deliberate attempt to avoid responsibility for his actions. Forensic analysis of the marijuana-infused candy found in Kirk's home also played a critical role in the prosecution's case. The analysis revealed that the candy contained a high level of THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, which the prosecution argued contributed to Kirk's psychosis and violent behavior. In the end, the jury found Kirk guilty of second-degree murder, largely due to the strength of the prosecution's evidence and arguments. This case brought to light the important discussions about the use of marijuana and its effects on mental health and behavior. While many people use marijuana for recreational or medicinal purposes without experiencing any adverse effects, research has shown that it can have significant negative effects on some individuals, particularly those who have a history of mental illness or substance abuse. Marijuana contains THC, which can alter the brain's chemistry and lead to changes in mood, perception, and behavior. In some cases, this can lead to psychotic symptoms such as hallucinations and delusions. Studies have also shown that marijuana use can increase the risk of developing mental illnesses such as depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia. It is important to note that not all individuals who use marijuana will experience negative effects, and the impact of the drug can vary depending on the factors, such as the method of use, the potency of the drug, and individual susceptibility. However, the case of Richard Kirk highlights the potential dangers of marijuana use, particularly when combined with the other factors such as a history of mental illness or substance abuse. The legalization of marijuana in some states has also raised important questions about regulation and oversight, and the need for greater education and awareness about the potential risks and benefits of marijuana use. The case of Richard Kirk was surrounded by controversy from the start, with many different opinions and perspectives on the events leading up to the murder and the subsequent trial. One of the key points of controversy was the role of marijuana in the crime, with some arguing that it played a significant role in Kirk's behavior, while others maintained that it was not a determining factor. The case also sparked debates about gun control, as Kirk purchased a gun shortly before the murder and used it to kill his wife. Some argued that stricter gun control laws could have prevented the tragedy, while others maintained that the issue was not with the availability of guns, but rather with the individual's mental state and behavior. There were also debates about the appropriate sentence for Kirk, with some arguing that he should be sentenced to life in prison for his crime, while others advocated for a more lenient sentence based on his mental state at the time of the murder. The verdict and sentencing in the case of Richard Kirk were highly debated and controversial. In April 2017, Kirk pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Some critics argued that the sentence was too lenient, given the severity of the crime and the fact that Kirk had purchased a gun shortly before the murder. They pointed to the need for stricter sentencing guidelines and harsher penalties for individuals who commit violent crimes while under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Others, however, believed the sentence was appropriate, given Kirk's history of mental illness and the fact that he had expressed genuine remorse for his actions. They argued that the focus should be on providing rehabilitation and support for individuals with mental health issues, rather than simply punishing them for their actions. The case has also left a profound impact on both the Kirk family and the victim's family. Kirk's wife, Kristine, was at home with him and their 3 children at the time of the murder, and the incident had a devastating effect on their lives. In addition to losing her husband and the father of her children, Kristine was left to deal with the trauma of the incident and its aftermath. The victim's family also suffered greatly as a result of the murder. Their loved one, Kristine's husband, was taken from them in a senseless act of violence, leaving them to cope with the pain and grief of their loss. Trial and sentencing brought back painful memories and emotions as they were forced to relive the tragedy and come to terms with its impact on their lives. Despite the difficult circumstances, both families have shown remarkable strength and resilience in the face of adversity. They have worked to rebuild their lives and honor the memory of their loved ones, while also raising awareness about the importance of mental health and responsible marijuana use. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more thought-provoking content. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.